With this being the anniversary of the got to get to 6, need to get to 6.
Classic.
That was in response to a question about what would define success in year 2 under Scott Frost. So, what would define success in year 2 under Matt Rhule?
Mm-hmm.
We heard Matt Rhule's response. He just says we just need to be good. And then proceeded to talk about how confident he was in this group. But he didn't throw a number on it, not that we were expecting him to. Hell, we weren't expecting Bill Moose to throw a number on it, quite frankly. What to you answers this question? What would define success in year 2 under Matt Rhule?
Man, I feel like I have gotten soft in my old age because I clicked 7.
Really?
Yeah, I know it's a surprise to me too, John. And I have
surprised because you would have expected yourself to think aim higher.
Yeah, like you can sell me on it. We could do this whole segment, and by the end of it, I could say I clicked the wrong button. The reason why I went with 7 over 8, I do not think that getting to a bowl game is enough. I don't. And I know you don't have to tell me that they have not made a bowl game since 2016. It's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
They have not had more than 5 wins since 2016. Like that is progress. At the very least, it is progress. Is that crawling and then walking though? Is that walking then run? It is progress. It is tangibly better. Where the 7 versus 8 and kind of where I really have done a whole lot of debating with myself internally and kind of why I went with 7 versus 8 or why I should have gone with 8 versus 7. I really think a lot about that first part of the schedule. And I think of, people keep talking about, they could start 7-0.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If they started 7-0, 7 wins obviously would not suddenly be okay. You couldn't go 0-5, 0-6, but I don't think they're going to start 7-0. I think that they're gonna stub their toe. For the love of God, I hope it's not to Colorado because we'll be on postgame show that night. But they're playing Rutgers in those first 5 games. They have a Friday night game at Illinois or versus Illinois rather. It's difficult. They have, according to K Ford, who's joining us tomorrow, by the way, Kelly Ford of the K Ford ratings, they have a 10% chance of starting 7-0. It doesn't seem that easy.
It's a 1 in 10 chance.
And so all of that to say, even if it was quote unquote only 6-1, only winning one more game in the last 5 would also seem disappointing. So like, as I'm talking myself out, you're not even having to give any opinions. And I'm also already like, I picked too low of a number. And yet 45% of voters actually said a bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I am shooting a little higher than the majority of this vote. There is an 8% that somehow is saying 9 wins, but 47% are back and forth between 7 or 8. That surprised me. I'll be honest that the bowl game was the one that had the majority.
I mean, the amount who responded to bowl game is almost identical to the combo amount that said 7 or 8 wins.
Yes.
And the more I think about this, and the more I heard you
talk myself through it,
a bowl game is not going to feel like progress.
No, it will not.
If it's just 6-6, and then imagine if they lose that bowl game and you end up 6-7.
So another sub 500
season.
And
so you're still continue the streak of sub 500 seasons.
Yeah.
I see the problem with the bowl game is that the bar to reach it is so low that just getting there, yes, it's about getting and don't come at me with it's an extra 15 practices. Oh, it's so important.
John,
I get it. Yes. Oh, great. Super. But to say that is progress seems like almost cheating the definition of progress.
Because it is a step up. It is better.
It is better. But I made the analogy yesterday. Let's say you have, you're a business and you've got a 5-year plan that by the end of the 5th year, we're going to have 30% more business than we have today.
Okay.
And so if you divide that out each year, theoretically, you should be increasing your business by 6%.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time you get to year 5, you're up 30%. So let's say the first year you hit the 6% mark. But in year 2, you only increase by 2%.
Puts a lot of pressure on year 3.
That means that puts more pressure on year 3 and 4 and 5. You have to overachieve in one of those years to eventually get to the goal. And to me, that's what a 6-win season would feel like. Is, yeah, you did grow the business, but it's lagging behind what you ultimately want to do, and I think it sets you back a little bit for year 3. So if Nebraska were to get to 6 wins and get to a bowl game, to me, in my view, that's going to put a little more onus to really kick it into high gear in year 3.
For sure. Let me ask you this.
Now, and I realize we're talking about just year 2. The answer to this question is
not year 2
just
and 3.
Year 2. It's not year 2 and 3.
Yeah,
it's just year 2. So fine, let's go back into the vacuum of just year 2. This is a schedule that sets up very nicely early on.
Nebraska will be favored in the first 7 games.
It's a team that should be better on offense. Kind of like Iowa.
Dude,
it's a low bar to clear, but man, they should be better. And if they can do it, if they can do at least as good as they did last year defensively, that should equate to at least 1 more win, if not 2.
So then you're
if
at
not
7.
3.
Then you're at 7, and then you're at 8.
So what would define success? I think, to me...
Are you at 8?
To me, 7 is as low as I'll go.
Definitely. Oh, yeah, for sure.
7 is as low as I go to define success. Because to me, just making a bowl is success. Now, I don't want this to come across as the guy who has pounded the table and said, don't panic if they lose the Colorado game. I'm going to say the same thing here. If they don't get to 7 or 8, and if they only get to 6, that doesn't mean that I don't think Matt Rhule couldn't make the bigger jump in year 3.
Because he always has.
But it will put more pressure on year 3.
Yeah, so a few things. Let me ask you this before I get to some comments. Do you think that Matt Rhule and the way in which he is speaking about this team has influenced your opinion at all?
It has to.
I think so too. And that's why I feel like I have softened on 7 being the right answer, and I have started wondering if 8 is actually the right answer. And maybe that is silly of me. Maybe that is silly of you, because it's talking season. What else is he going to say? But, I've been listening to this guy now for over a year. We're still getting to know him, but I do think
but we get his cadence.
Exactly. And I think that he is a straight shooter in a lot of ways. And so when he doesn't need to say these things. He doesn't need to be this optimistic. There's no reason to.
No.
And the fact that he is interesting. Max writes, 6 losses with this schedule means we lose every game that anyone would care about, plus drop another one to an opponent we would say we should beat. Won't be satisfying at all. That is a fun way, or less fun, I guess, if we're talking about just losses. It's an interesting way, though, to look at the math problem that we're discussing right now. Because, if you do the 7 games and then the 5 games, if you kind of break it up in that regard, and that does include a UCLA program that's going to be in a weird spot. But let's just say that that's how you divide the schedule. Most likely it means losses to all those teams and then a bonus loss somewhere else. That would be, I understand why people would be like, that'd be a bummer. Last year, who was their best win that they had last year in terms of like that team's ability? It was probably Northwestern because they made it to a bowl game, right? But that didn't feel, in hindsight, it doesn't feel that great.
Ooh, wow. I've never actually thought of that question. Who was Nebraska's best?
They beat them. They beat Illinois. Illinois didn't make a bowl game. They beat Purdue. Purdue didn't make a bowl game. And then they had 2 non-conference wins. And I'll be honest, I don't remember what La Tech and the other team they beat last year, Northern Illinois. I don't believe that those teams made bowl games either.
Ooh.
Yeah, so they didn't have any memorable wins last year. I mean,
no.
The fact that I had to search and claw looking for the answer.
Yeah. They didn't have a quality win last year.
You need a win like that this year. Whether it's certainly Colorado represents that for all the reasons we've discussed a million times. But Wisconsin, haven't beaten them in over a decade. Iowa have 1 win versus them in a decade. I mean, certainly if you were somehow able to get the Ohio State pellet on your wall, like shout out to you. USC, I know that they're in a weird spot right now. I think UCLA you could talk me into it being memorable. A Friday night game versus Illinois. Like, you do want to leave this season not just saying, oh, they did it, they got to a bowl game, but more like, and there's good memories associated with it. Like, last year was a slog. Even if they would have gone to a bowl game, last year was a slog. I don't think people really enjoyed the process of getting to watch the team. You want to leave happy with kind of everything that you got to see.
Now, after Max said 6 losses with this schedule, that Travis responded, Max, that's 2 or 3 fewer losses than Nebraska's had in any season the last 5 years. And that goes back to my original point, if you're just looking at the raw numbers. But again, can you call that a success when you stack it up against the teams that they're playing? And the ability Nebraska has to actually build some momentum.
Yeah.
They're not playing Purdue's schedule. They're playing the opposite of Purdue's schedule. This is a very manageable schedule, all things considered, considering the era that we're now in and the quality teams out there. You're only playing one team that's projected to be in the top 4 in the league.
Yeah.
Right? Because SC is 5th, right?
Believe they're definitely not top 4.
So you're only playing one team against the projected top 4. Now, sure, you're playing a lot of teams that are right around you, but
USC is 6.
6, okay.
Iowa's 5th. Nebraska on the preseason rankings, the preseason predictions from the Big Ten writers, they're playing teams ranked 1, 5, 6, 7, 9. I got to remember who they're playing. 13, 15, 17, and 18. And if you look at it from that perspective,
right. And you can argue, well, but it's the media's projections. What do they know? Fine, whatever. But we're just, we're just spitballing here because that's what we do during talking season. But again, that's hard for me to look at 6 and say, yep, that was a success.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I can't say that it is. Sure, you get the 13th game. You get the extra practices. Good on you. You've unlocked that achievement. But you're kind of beating your head against the wall. And I'll say it again. I won't be disappointed necessarily, but I do think that would put more pressure on year 3.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And people would almost be expecting it too in a weird way because of what he's done in year 3s at his previous stops.
Sure.
And especially Baylor.
I've tried not to do that because not every situation's identical. I get it. Temple, he did it. Baylor, he did it. I get that. Doesn't mean every situation is the same.
Joel writes, it seems like every summer we've talked about how manageable the schedule is until the games are played. Yes, we have. And that's why whenever John and I do this, I really do try to make sure to emphasize on paper, it looks like a great schedule. Now, I will say to back up the on paper, they are going to be favored. And that is a fact. Barring either an early loss that completely causes us to reevaluate how we're viewing the team, or opponents on the schedule playing so much above their preseason expectation. Nebraska will be a preseason favorite in each of the first 7 games. John has on the video stream right now, he has the SP
this is Bill Conley's SP post-spring SP Plus.
And so Nebraska, 26-point favorites versus UTEP. Let's round it. 11 versus Colorado. Northern Iowa, we talked about yesterday, they'll be above 30 points. Illinois, 9. Purdue, 10. Rutgers, 4. Indiana, 11. And again, this goes back to the K-Ford stuff, and I'm excited to talk to him tomorrow. If you add all that together, it does not mean you're 7-0. They have a 10% chance of doing it, a 1 in 10 chance of doing it. But defending us saying it looks manageable on paper, and maybe I'm just remembering wrong, I don't recall a schedule being this manageable on paper over the last few years.
No.
Last year in the first, now we were all wrong about Colorado, right? And some of us picked them to win and lose versus Minnesota. But the first month of the season last year also included Michigan. Mm-hmm. Certainly in Frost's last full season, and by that point, I had baked into them just falling on their faces all the time. But even that season included a Michigan State team that did surprise us, but it included a Michigan team, that for all the questions was still Michigan at the time. And
Oklahoma.
we knew Oklahoma. Thank you. Exactly. Oklahoma was also on the 2022 schedule.
Yeah, this is the best runway. This is the longest, smoothest runway Nebraska's had in several years.
Yes. And that I do not think you cannot argue that. Will they go undefeated? I am going to say no. Will they lose more than 2? I will also say no. I think the sweet spot, if you get to 5-2, I think you're feeling solid. If you get to 6-1, you're great because you don't have to answer any more questions about bowl games for the rest of the year, and maybe you're loose for once. Certainly, if you're 7-0, this place is going to come unglued.
Yeah,
for all the best reasons.
Yeah. So again, building it off of that, I think to me 7 is absolutely the minimum in terms of what would feel like a success.
Yeah. Aaron texts into the show, 402-951-1620. Here's the thing. Nebraska needs a win. It shouldn't win. Also, Nebraska's lost games it shouldn't have every year in this bowl drought. It's somewhere in the middle. 7 wins seems like the over-under. Yeah, and it's 7.5, actually. We can't really probably say one or the other because until we see it, how can we convince it, even if it feels different?
And that's the other thing. And again, not to over credit, but Nebraska hasn't hit its win total in Vegas since 2016.
8 years. It all
so if you want to
use
the Vegas win total, I mean 7 is still the under.
Yeah, it is. And by the way,
8 is the winning bet for the over.
I just checked the juice because I wanted to know what it was right now. Right now, the juice is actually shading the under barely. -114 under, -106 over. So the juice is now on the under. So that means money has come in on Nebraska being an under team. But again, when you look at that was a fun exercise looking at teams that they play. Preseason rankings in the Big Ten. They play teams ranked 1, 5, 6. That's Ohio State, Iowa, USC. 7, Wisconsin. Obviously, Nebraska's at 8. Rutgers is at 9. They're playing them. And then after that, it is Illinois 13, UCLA 15, Indiana 17, and Purdue 18. The difference between Nebraska being 6 versus 7 versus 8 is probably going to be the teams that surround them. Nebraska's at 8, and they play teams 5, 6, and 7, and 9. So they play 4 teams that are sandwiched around them.
Correct.
Nebraska's the burger, Wisconsin is the pickles, USC is the tomato, and Iowa's the onion.
Oh, so you hate USC.
Actually, Iowa's the tomato because they're the last boss. Can they take out, like I will on my next hamburger, can they take out the last boss? And Rutgers is the mayonnaise. Of course, they're the base below the burger. But in all seriousness, it's those 4 games. Those are going to be the difference between 6 versus 8 versus 7.
Or should be.
They should be, yeah, for sure. And
they should be.
I don't want to hear. Let's throw the graphic back up real fast. Those teams that I just mentioned, Rutgers, 4-point favorite. Nebraska is. Let's see. Wisconsin, Nebraska, 3-point dog. Iowa, 8-point dog. USC, 8-point dog. Now, 2 of those are on the road that I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
2 of them are at home. Rutgers and Wisconsin are home games. USC and Iowa are road games. But those are going to be the difference. Those are going to be the difference. Look at that. We did this whole thing. We barely even talked about Colorado.